Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf ayin chet. We are about 12 lines up or something like that on daf ayin zayin amabet. We're gonna do a little bit of review. I know that Dove wasn't able to teach yesterday, so although we're sort of going to just continue with what today's daf is, but I thought it made sense to review where we are. Yeah, it's gonna. Oh, good. Okay, so we are. Yesterday we began the 8th chapter of Maseches Gittin, and we discussed a husband throwing the divorce document to his wife, and the Mishnah noted that if it lands in her house or her courtyard, so then the wife's divorced, and if it's in his house, his courtyard, or even in their shared bed, then the wife is not divorced. And if it's in her lap or her sewing basket, then the wife is divorced. So those were the three different categories. And it seems like basically what we're saying is that if it's her property, so then she's divorced. If it's his property, then they're not divorced. And even if it's an element of his property, they're not going to divorce. Now, the Gemara asks, well, 1 second, how in the world could the wife have anything? Because we know that a wife brings into the marriage two types of property. One is son barzel. Those are things that essentially the husband immediately acquires from the wife, and he can do whatever he wants with it. And the reason that he can do whatever he wants with it is because he has an obligation to pay her the original value of the object at the end of their marriage. And so as a result, that's son barzel, because it's like a bronze sheep. It stays the same. It doesn't have anything. That's what she's going to get back. It's a Picasso. Yeah. Well, although no, because a Picasso painting, it's interesting, right? It goes up in value. Oh well, not only goes up in value, but the point is that he would be able to give her just the money that's associated with it, as opposed to the object itself.
Marriage
at the time, yes, exactly. So he would be much advantageous. So if she thinks that it's going to go up in value, then she's going to assign it the other quality, not nichson barzel, but nichse malog. Nichse malog is the category where the husband, usually it's for things like fields, where the husband gets to plow the field and get the produce of the field, but at the end of the day, she gets the field back. So either way, the problem is that if let's say the man throws the get into a nichson, certainly if it's nichson barzel, the husband owns it full and outright. So, and he can even sell it. So nichse malog. So then he can't sell it, but he gets all the profits associated with it. Well, one of the benefits of a piece of property is the ability to take ownership of something that lands on the property. And so as a result, that get never transfers to the wife, is the question that the Gemara asks. And so the Gemara offered two answers to our question. Answer number one is that we're talking about a special situation where the husband basically transferred to the wife before they got married, while they were still in the Erusin stage, just before they become Nisuin, just before they do the final marriage. So he says, listen, I'm not going to have any rights to your property. And so as a result, she gets to keep her property, meaning they can contract around the two categories of nichse malog and nichse son barzel. They have the ability to do so. So that's the story. So next, so that's one answer. But Rava offers the brilliant concept of that the get and the wife's full rights of the property come together. Because as soon as she's divorced, she also gets back her property.
Correct.
Right? And so as a result, we'll just look at both of them happening at the exact same time and allow the change of ownership of the property, where it goes from his responsibility to her responsibility, will allow that to happen at the same time. And so thereby the get will be transferred to her along with the property. And then we close by noting an interesting debate regarding whether or not the wife needs to be present at the property. Ula says that the wife needs to be present, that basically the property is like an extension of her hand. And Rabbi Oshia said, no, as long as the property is guarded and protected and she knows it's hers, that's enough. That is enough. We don't need her to be present. She could be on the other side of the country, and that would be sufficient. As
she need a shtar for that?
For
the woman?
according to the first answer, where we said that the husband basically made the arrangement ahead of time, yes, probably she would need a shtar for that. I mean, it would be helpful for her to have a shtar for that. So yes, I agree completely. Okay, so now we're going to discuss the whole of today pretty much is more cases of throwing. So if you like the idea of throwing, of pitching, it's a good baseball, baseball analogy. We're going to have a lot of get pitches being thrown. So we're going to pick up. We are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 lines up. Middle of the line, third word on the line is hahu. Hahu gavra. So there was a fellow. So he's throwing a get to his wife. And again, almost all the cases that we're going to be dealing with today are like that. But there was, and because she was sitting, and she was placed in the chutzner. And the get went and it landed on a block. And Rashi says, al gabe chatichat eitz. Basically, it was landed on a piece of wood. And so Amar Rav Yosef says, Chazinan, I havya arba amos al arba amos. So palagle rishusal lenafshe. If in fact that piece of wood is 4 by 4, then it becomes its own location and is separate from the rest of the field. The ilo achada rishusahi. If not, it's all one domain. So the Gemara is going to ask, I don't understand, why should we even care about that? But my askinan, what are we talking about? If you tell me that it's her courtyard, ki havi arba amos, my havi. Who cares whether it's 4 by 4 amos? Because let's say it is 4 by 4 amos. Who owns the field? She does. Who owns the block? She does. So as a result, the block belongs to her. So who cares whether it's 4 by 4? So she owns anything that lands on the block also, just as she owns anything that lands in the field. So 1 second, you want to say it's her chutzner? Well, kilo habi arba almost my habi. Who cares how big it is? Whether it's 4 by 4 and above, or it's less than 4 by 4, doesn't make a difference. No way is that going to end up being somebody else's possession. So lo tzricha de oshla makom. What kind of house does she want? She wants to be able to live in a house like the one she lives in now. So lo tzricha de oshla makom. So we're going to say that it's where the husband lent her a place. So he lent her the place because and basically he lent her where she is. Dechan makom mostly inshi. People only lend one place. Meaning, if I say to you, you can put your duffel bag on my field, I'm telling you to put it on my field. You don't get to put it on, the platform that I have in my field, because I'm only giving you opportunity to put something on one place. And so as a result, Tremakomos lo mostly in 2 blocks, 2 places don't get lent. And so as a result, if the block is in fact 4 by 4, well, then the block is assumed not to have been lent, and it will be the husband's. But if in fact the block is less than 4 by 4, well, then the block is part of the field and is considered all one with the field. So, and therefore, if it lands on the block and it's smaller, it will be considered a valid get. The lo amran ela de lo gavoa asara. Now, when we said that the block is less than 4 by 4, it becomes part of the field. That's only if the block is less than 10 tefachim tall. Aval gaboa asara, but if it is 10 tefachim tall, aval gat lo havi arba amos. even though it's not 4 amos high, lo amron ela delesle. So then we have to say that it's going to be a different location, and the get wouldn't be effective. So therefore, we must be talking about where the block is less than 10 tefachim place, and below amron ela delesle shem levi. And also, it has to not have a name associated with it. Aval isle shem levi, aval gav delo gaboa asara, aval gav delo habi arba amos. It would be a different place. So even if you have a place on your field that you call the stand stage, okay, I like that, the stand stage, and it even though it's not 4x4 and it's not 10 tefachim tall, but it's your stand stage. It's where you stand so that everybody can hear you when you talk to people that are in your field. And everybody knows that that's the stand stage. And so as a result, people are going to say that is, if Stan is lending you the field, he is not lending you the stand stage. You don't get to go up on the stand stage. That's for Stan to stand on the stand stage. Wow, that's a lot of stands, STAs. Okay, in any event, that is the story. So we've now concluded that case of throwing the get and it lands not where it was intended. Okay, now the next piece of our Mishnah talked about afilu hu ima b'mita, that even if he throws it into the bed, even if she's in the bed with him, it's not going to be a valid get. So Amar Rava lo shanu ella b'mita shalo. That's only true if the bed belongs to him. Aval b'mita shala megureshes. If the bed actually belongs to her, then she's divorced. And Tanya Nami Hachi, we have a brisa that says the same thing, because that if in fact let's see it inside. If in fact, well, Rabbi Eliezer, what does the brisa say? Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Eliezer says, "B'mita shelo eino megoreshes." If the get lands on a bed that belongs to him, she's not divorced. B'mita shela megoreshes. But if it lands on a bed that belongs to her, she's divorced. Well, b'mita shela megoreshes. If it belongs to her, she's divorced. Well, then doesn't that teach us an interesting principle that actually there turns out to be a debate about in the Gemara and Baba Basra? So we'll learn about it, sometime next year. So because what do we have? Ubamita shalom megoresha. So you're telling me that if the blood belongs to her, she's divorced. Well, then kilyo shalokeach bereshus mocherhu. This is a situation of somebody who's making an acquisition, and the kli, the vessel, belongs to the buyer, but where is it located? It's located in the possession, in the domain of the seller. Meaning, in the husband-wife case, the husband owns the house, the wife owns the bed. In the buyer-seller situation, the seller owns the store, the buyer owns the vessel that he brought with him into the store. And the question is, when the food or whatever that's being bought is put into the vessel, does it immediately become the buyer's? So shmamina kilyo shalokeach bereshus mocher kana lokeach. Shouldn't this show that whenever you have a buyer's utensil in the property of the seller, then the buyer is going to have bought the object? And so the answer is no. And the why is that a problem? Maybe we can make it a proof, because again, the Gemara in Bava Basra discusses this exact issue, and it doesn't bring this Gemara. It doesn't talk about this Gemara. So lo tzricha de gaboa asara. No, so it must be that we're talking about the bed is 10 tefachim high, and so the 10 tefachim high bed creates its own space, own legal space, and therefore it's not considered hit the property. Well, one second, about ukum kare. What about the space of the legs? And Tosos adds, what about the space of the bed itself, the airspace of the bed that is belonging to the husband? So amkom kare lo kapte inchi. So for the space of the legs, a person's not going to be particular, meaning that they're going to be understanding if their wife puts a bed or something else in the property, and because she has essentially permission to put the bed in the property, now all of a sudden we're going to say that bed now can acquire a get for the wife. And so as a result, we've answered the question of what bed are we talking about? It's got to be his bed in our Mishnah. That's going to be problematic. But if it's her bed, she'll be divorced. So latochika. So again, our Mishnah said that it's going to go into a basket. Olato kalta megoreshes. Into her lap or into her basket. So amai, why should again the basket work at all? Maybe it should be again kilyo shelf lokav versus mokirhu. It's the vessel of the buyer in the place of the seller. So Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel Kagon Shahaisa Kalta Tuluyaba. So we're going to qualify it in 5 different ways, 5 different answers to the question of why should the throwing into the basket work? And if it does work, shouldn't it just go ahead and be a proof to the concept of the buyer's utensil and the property of the seller is something that can make an acquisition? So the first answer is that we're talking about where the basket is hanging from her. And so as a result, it's considered as if it's her. Well, it doesn't have to be, and that's in fact what Rabbi Elazar said in the name of Rabbi Oshia. It was also hanging. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Amar Kshura Apal Pi She'ein Tluya. No, just needs to be connected to her. It needs to be tied to her. And so once it's tied to her, that's sufficient. Well, Rav Ada bar Ahava, Rav Ada bar Ahava says it does, that he thinks it could be even less than that. Shahaisa Kalta Menachas Lea ben Yerechoseha, that it's actually sufficient for the basket to just be in the inside the lap, inside on the ground in the lap that she has. And if we take a look at Rashi, 3, 6, 9 lines down in Rashi, ben Yerechoseha, the afal pi shemuna pakarka. That and Rashi explains that even though it's resting on the ground, Ein adam makbid al kol makom mushav ishto. A person basically is understanding that his wife is going to be in the house and he is not going to be particular about where she sits in the house. He's going to, be understanding, especially if he's in the process of trying to divorce her and he wants the divorce to be effective. He doesn't want her to be able to say that divorce is not effective because she's in his property and the basket doesn't belong to her. So al kol makom moshav ishto v'ad achshav haya oto makom kanoi lo. And so as a result, until now, the place is going to be acquired for her. And so as a result, basically, we have the reverse side of what Rava said. Rava had this whole situation where at the moment of the acquisition, the property didn't really belong to her, but we're going to say the property and the get come together. And here it's the property and the get leave together, essentially. As soon as it goes into her lap, she acquires it. But as soon as she acquires it, now all of a sudden the husband is going to or can be makbid on the where she's sitting, and the location that she's sitting no longer has any belonging to her. So that's answer number 3. Answer number 4, Rav Masharshia bar Avdimi Amar Kagon Shahaya Bala Mocher Kalasos. We can even give another example of where it would work. Let's say the husband sells baskets. If the husband sells baskets and he's got baskets all over the house, well, he doesn't care about another basket being in his house. And so as a result, even if the basket is not between her thighs, he would say, according to Ramasharshia, the husband's not going to care about the location of the baskets, and therefore that basket does still belong to her. She has permission to put it there, and so as a result, when the husband puts the get into that basket can acquire the get for the wife. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Makom Chekat Kanoyala, that whatever place she's occupied by her lap, that belongs to her. Makom Kalta Kanoyala. And similarly, any place that her sewing basket belongs to her. Meaning, again, the idea is that the husband is not going to be makbid on these things. So Amar Rava, my time at the Rabbi Yochanan, why does Rabbi Yochanan allow both the place where she sits and the sewing basket? Doesn't make a difference whether the guy's a basket selling merchant or not. So essentially, each of our answers have expanded the scope. People, husbands don't generally care where their wives put things like a basket or themselves. So, and Tanyanami Hachi, we've got a brisa that seems to be along the same lines. Zroko loloto cheka, you throw it into her lap, oloto kalta, or into her sewing basket, oloto kol davar shu kalta, or anything similar to a sewing basket. Harezo megareshes, that then she's divorced. Kol davar shu bekalta le'atuye mai. What does it come to say? Anything that's similar? Shehu kikalta la'atuye mai. What does it say that it's if it's similar to a sewing basket? What does that come to include? La'atuye taska da'achla bat tamre. It includes a bowl of dates that she's eating from, and so as a result, that's the story. So again, we've got all these details, and the bottom line is that if the husband isn't going to be makbid about where her property is, then her property has the ability to be kona a get for her. Okay, so more now we're going to well, actually, I had said that we're going to be all about throwing. Here we're going to change topic slightly. We're going to go back to conveying, but now we're going to be conveying with some sense of deception. So Amar law, if the husband says to the wife, Kinsi shtar chose, take this note of indebtedness. Here, I'm going to give you a check, right? Here's a check, right? A check is a note of indebtedness. It says that I owe you money. And so the husband says that to the wife, or she finds some document behind the husband. We'll see that it'll be in his pocket or in his belt. And Korah, and she goes and takes it and reads it. V'harehu gita, and now she sees that it's a get. Ain't no get. She's not actually divorced yet, because ad sheyomer la ha gitich. He has to actually say, "Here is your get." And Rashi explains, first Rashi in the Mishnah, ad sheyomer la ha gita ba'afilu achar shabali yada omer la kain v'dayo. She can. It doesn't have to be said before she takes it, but it does need to be said. So nasan biyada v'hiyashena. If he puts it in her hand while she's sleeping, so then what's the story? Neora, and she wakes up. Korah, and she reads it. V'hareyu gita, and it's her get. Ain't no get. It's still not a good divorce. Ad sheyomer la ha gitech. He has to say, "Here is your get." Because and let's take a look in Tosos. Tosos here. This is a Tosos that we saw way back on Daf Nun Hey Amud Aleph earlier, because we saw that it was relevant to that Daf. So, but let's take a look and we'll see. Ri haya matzrich lenotin get leishto lomar hai gitech. So, according to the Ri, not only do you need to say that here is your get, but according to the Ri, when the husband says that, he should also say v'gam. He should also say harei at muteres l'kol adam. You are hereby permitted to anyone. You're able to marry anyone. Kedemashma b'hamagarish, as we will see in a few days in Parak Hamagarish. Shahayu regilun lomar gamkein, that they would also say this. V'dan, and that's in fact the case. The judge umihu. However, we have a question. Kasha d'bahanazikin in Parakanazikin back on Daf Nun Hey Amud Aleph, we had the case of Rabbi Yochanan ben Gugoda. So mashma da'afilu lo amar kasher. It seems like you don't have to say hare gitech, hagitech, because Gabi me'odusa shall Rabbi Yochanan ben Gugoda. Because from the testimony of Rabbi Yochanan ben Gugoda, Nishma, we derive Amr la'edim ru'u getzeh. We said that if you say to witnesses, look and watch that I'm going to give this get, and then you go to the wife and you say, here is your note of indebtedness, it's going to be a valid get. So how could we say that here, then when you say here's your note of indebtedness, it's not a valid get? So v'yesh lomar. So of course the key difference is that in that case you told the witnesses ahead of time that you were going to be giving a get, so they were able to watch a get be given. But here you did not tell anybody that you were going to give them. You were giving a get. You told her that you're giving her a contract. So v'yesh lomer dahasam nami achar kach yagidu la ha'edim shehi megureshes. That in fact the witnesses in that situation would still need to tell her that she is divorced. That if they didn't tell her that she's divorced, that would not be sufficient. Why not? Because because even though at the time of the Gemara a woman could be divorced against her will, nonetheless we need to say to her, that this is her get. And you're permitted to be married to anybody. So that way she'll know that she's divorced. And she could, so that she doesn't go back to her husband. Because one of the key aspects of a successful divorce is that the woman leave the family home or leave whatever the marriage. If we just think about it from a philosophical standpoint, we don't have to think about it from a physical standpoint, leave the marriage and not return to it. And that is why we've seen that a young girl who may not be mature enough and doesn't understand this concept cannot be divorced because she is going to go back. And that's part of the reason that a woman who's insane is unable to be divorced, because she won't understand that she's not supposed to go back. Okay, so that is that concept. And so we see that you have to, on some level, be frank about the divorce. And let's see now what the Gemara teaches on this. So we have a principle that the husband actually has to give the get to the wife. So the Gemara is going to ask about the situation where the wife found the document behind the husband. So that's what the Gemara is asking. So ki amar la hagitech mahavi. So now in that situation where the woman found the get behind the husband, and now the husband says, this is your get, why does it make any difference? This is really a situation where the husband says to the wife, pick up your get off the ground. And we says, the Amar Rabba, and Rabba taught about that. You haven't said anything if you tell your wife to pick up the get up off the ground, because the husband has an obligation. The nasan biyada, he has to put it into her hand. So Amos shalaftu miachorav. So she pulled the get from behind him, meaning it was in his belt, it was in his pocket. So as a result, it's like she took it directly from him. Well, shalaf tonami, even if she took it away from him directly, haba'inam v'nasam biyada, he has to do an action. It seems like what you're describing doesn't involve an action by him. Veleka, there's no action by him. So lo tzrika de arak lachartze ushlapte. No, when she saw the document, he twisted his body so that effectively he was giving it to her from behind him. And so as a result, that's why it worked. And Tanya Nami Hachi, we've got a brisa along these lines. Amar like Kinsi Shtar Chovze, to receive this get of indebtedness, Osha Shalafto Me'achorav, or if she took it from behind him, Karato Vaharehu Gita, and she reads it and she sees it's a get. In those situations, ain't no get. Again, if just like on our Mishnah, Ad Yomer La Hagidech, she has to say, here is your get. Divrei Rebbe. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Lolam ain't no get. No, it's not a good get. Ad Sheyatulenu Heimeno. She has to take it from, the husband has to take it back from her in this situation. He has to actually give it to her again. So we see this concept that the giving is a crucial concept. And so as a result, that is what we're covering to say that at least on some level, even Rebbe would agree that you needed to shift your hips. Nitano biyada v'hiyashena, and the brisa continues, if he puts it in her hand while she's sleeping, neora v'kora v'hari hugita, and then she wakens and she reads it and it sees that it's a get. Ain't no get, again, it's not a good get. Ad sheyomer la hagitech divrei Rebbe. That's what Rebbe says. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, ad sheyitzalena heimenu. No, it's not a good get until he takes it back from her. But Yaksor v'yitanenela, and then he gives it to her again, Vayomer la hagitek, and says, here is your get. Utsricha, And now we need these two arguments. We need to have the argument both in connection with the note of indebtedness or the wife taking it from behind him, and with respect to giving it to her while sleeping. Why? If you only had the first case of where she took it from behind him, or he said it was a check when in fact it was a get. Maybe if that's the situation where Rebbe says it's enough for you to now say, here's your get. She was capable of being divorced at the time that the get got into her hand. It just didn't get into her hand in the right way. But if he puts it into her hand while she's sleeping, at that moment, she can't be divorced because she's not awake. So Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Maybe Rebbe would agree to Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar that the husband needs to take it back and give it again. And if you were to only have the dispute in connection with the wife who's sleeping, that's where Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says that the husband needs to take it back. When you talk about a check, or you talk about the woman taking it from him, maybe he would agree with Rebbe, because after all, in that situation, the wife is awake, and so maybe it would work. So tzricha, therefore, we need both arguments. Okay. Now that we've done that, the husband, the Gemara now addresses the status of a slave owned by the wife. So Amar Rava Ksavla get, if the husband writes a get, Vinasano the biad avda, and he puts it into the hand of the slave, Yashain umishamarto, if he's asleep and she's guarding him, so harezek get, then it's a valid get, because it's just like you put it into a courtyard. Nay, or if he's awake, no get. Then if he's awake, then it's not a valid get. Dehabule chatzar hamishtameres shaloladata, because then it's a courtyard that is not actually under her control. It's guarded by somebody else. Namely, it's guarded by the slave himself. Yashin umishmarto hareza get. Now, in second, you're telling me that if he's sleeping and being guarded, it is a good get. Amai, why should that be valid? Chatzar mahalechasi. That the slave is effectively a traveling courtyard. If a chatzar mahalechas lo kana, and we have a general principle that a traveling courtyard does not have the ability to create an acquisition. Meaning, if you put a board on an animal that belongs to you, and now that animal is movable, so as a result of putting something on that board, even though it's effectively equal to a rishus, it's a domain, it's its own domain, but it doesn't actually is not considered able to create acquisitions. So v'chitema yashin shiny, and if you want to say that sleeping is different because the person's not moving, the slave's not moving, v'ha'amarava kol she'ilu mahalech lo kana. Anytime where something is moving, it won't make an acquisition. Omid v'yoshev lo kana. Even if it's standing still or sitting down, it's not going to create an acquisition. So how could it be that this sleeping slave is able to make an acquisition? So we have an answer that we've actually seen a few times throughout Shas so far, that we're talking about where the slave is bound up. The slave is not able to move. And so as a result, it's not that he's capable of moving, but sleeping or sitting or standing, but rather is incapable of moving. And that is why, because of the binds that bind him, then he is not going to be able to move. And so as a result, he really does become exactly like a courtyard. Okay, so now again, back to the throwing. I said we were going to talk mostly about throwing. Here we go again. So we talked about when she's in her own yard, or just gets thrown into her yard, even if she's not there. We talked about when it gets thrown into the bed, and if maybe it's her bed or it's his bed. We talked about a case where it gets thrown into the basket. Maybe it's in her lap, maybe it's not in her lap. In any event, now we're talking about she's in public. Uzrakolo, and he throws it to her. So karav la, if it's close to her, megareshes, then she's divorced. Karav lo, ain't a megareshes. If it's close to him, she's not divorced. Machza maksa. If it's 50-50, megareshes ve'ena megareshes, then she's divorced and not divorced, meaning that she has the stringencies associated with each, because if it's an uncertain situation. V'chein le'inyan kedushin, and the same thing is true for marriage. V'chein le'inyan achov, and the same thing is true for a debt. Amar lo bal chovo, and specifically, what do we mean by it's true for a debt? If the creditor, if the lender says, "Zrok li chovi," throw me what you owe me, uzrako lo, and the debtor throws it to him, karav lamalva, if it lands close to the lender, so zacha hamalva, the lender has made an acquisition of the money as soon as it gets to there, and now if it gets lost afterwards, it's tough luck on the lender. But karav lalova, if it's thrown and it ends up closer to the borrower, well, then the lender's hasn't yet acquired it, and if something happens to it, so then halova chayev, the borrower is still obligated to pay the debt. Mechza mechza, shneim yachaloku. If it's 50-50, well, then they'll both divide it. So now, heki dami karav la, the heki dami karav la. What do we mean by close to him and close to her? Now, it could mean that we just mean physical proximity, but we're going to see that doesn't make sense because of the machza al machza case. So let's take a look and see. So Amar Rav, Arba Amos Shalah, Zeu Karav La. Arba Amos Shalo, Zeu Karav Lo. That what we say close to him, we mean close to her, we mean within her 4 amos. When we say close to him, we mean within his 4 amos. Well, Hechi Dami Mechzo Mechza. What's the meaning of 50-50? So we're going to give, by the way, we're going to give 4 answers to this question. 4 answers to this question. And the first answer, now that we've just asked, well, what's the story with the machza al machza? We're going to give 3 sub answers to explain what 50-50 is when we have a case, when we say that close to her and close to him mean within arba amos. So Hechi Dami al machza al machza, Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yitzchak, Kagon shehayu shnein omdin ba'arba amos. If we're talking about a situation where they're both standing within 4 amos of the spot that the get landed. So so that's potential answer number 1. The Lexay, 1 second. If that's true, let's the Lexay hey menaihu kadim. So then we should see which one of them got there first, and that way, and we should let that person be the acquirer because they got there first, and so that they own that specific spot. And if you say, well, they both got there at the same time, you cannot do anything at the exact same time as somebody else. And so as a result, that can't be. Ella Amar of Kahana, Hacha b'Shemona Amos b'Tzum Tzaos Askinan. No, we're talking about where they're exactly 8 amos apart. And so the get landed within 4 amos of each of them, but we're talking about different parts. So they were both able to acquire the get completely, or at least partially. Well, 1 second, the get yotze ma'arba amos shalo la'arba amos shalah, right? And the get goes from within his 4 amos to within her 4 amos. Well, 1 second, that doesn't work either because v'ha agid gabe. But then he still is holding a piece of it. And we know that the husband has to give the get to the wife fully. He can't still be holding it. And we're going to see later today a case where there's a string attached, a literal string, not a figurative string, a literal string attached, and that's going to potentially be a problem. Elo Rabba Rav Yosef the Amri Tarbayu. So Rabba and Rav Yosef say, what's the case of 50-50? Hacha b'shtei chite edim askin. We're talking about where there are 2 sets of witnesses. Achas Omer's karav la, v'achas Omer karav la. That one group of the witnesses say that it landed within 4 amos of the husband. The other group says no, it landed within 4 amos of the wife. And so we don't have a definitive case. And so as a result, in that situation, we're going to apply the strictures of both the being divorced and being married. All right, so that was answer number 1. Answer number 1 is that we're talking about 4 amos, and we mean that we're talking about and 50-50 means that there are 2 sets of witnesses that one say close to him and one say close to her. Rabbi Yochanan offers the second answer, and he says the following. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Karav La Shaninu Afilu Me'am. No, we just mean that it's closer to her, even if it's 100 amos away. The Karav La Shaninu Afilu Me'am. And when we say close to him, we mean again, even if it's 100 amos away. But the problem is hechi dami matzah matzah. How in the world could you have a 50-50 case in that situation? That's the problem. You can't have a 50-50 case in that situation because you end up with the exact same problem that we said before that you end up being still in the husband's domain. Now, I guess you could answer that for like Rabbah and Rav Yosef, where you have two witnesses say that it was really closer to him, and two witnesses say that it was really closer to her. But in any event, the Gemara does not go there, but rather it next offers the third possibility. So Amar Rav Shemin bar Abba l'didim parsha la minei de Rabbi Yochanan. Actually, Rabbi Yochanan explained to me what he was saying. What he was saying is hu yachal l'shomra v'hi eina yachal l'shomra. That what does it mean when it's close to him? Zeo karav lo. That it means that he's able to watch it, but she's not able to watch it. Meaning he himself, where it lands, he can make sure that no animal or other person is able to get it. But he yichala l'shomro, v'hu eina yachal l'shomro. Now, when it comes to a get that lands in a place that she's able to watch and he's unable to watch, zeo karav la. That's considered close to her. Meaning, even if it's 100 amos away, but it's not just about being physically closer. Shneim yicholim shomro, shneim ein yicholim shomro. If both of them are able to watch it, or neither of them are able to watch it, zeo matzah matzah. And Tosfos notes that when we say neither of them are able to watch it, we mean neither of them individually. Because if neither of them are able to watch it at all, then of course it shouldn't be a divorce. There's no connection that the wife has to it at all. So as a result, what we're talking about is where they're both able to watch it together. And so as a result, that's what the situation where we'll say that that it's considered 50-50. So Amarua Rabbanan Kamei the Rabbi Yochanan Mishmei the Rabbi Yonasan Hachi. And so the rabbis reported that explanation to Rabbi Yochanan in the name of Rabbi Yonasan. So basically, what Rabbi Shimon ben Shemin bar Abba said was reported back to Rabbi Yochanan. It was said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. It was said back to him. And Amar Yadin Chavrin Bivalai Lefarushe Ki Hai Taima. Our Babylonians, know how to interpret in accordance with this explanation, meaning they've got it right. They explained my understanding correctly. And Tanya Nami Hachi, we've got even a brisa that says this. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Kolshu Karav La Milo, Uva Chelav Unitalo, Ena Megoreshes. Anytime it's closer to her than to him, and a dog can come and take it away, she is not divorced. So Ena Megoreshes, Kol Hechi Tintere V'Sezel. Does she have to keep on watching it? Meaning, if all you need to do is watch it, then as soon as you watch it and you could guard it, then it's a divorce. She doesn't have to continue to watch it. So if a dog later comes and takes it away, who cares? So Ella Lav Hachikamer. This is what we must be talking about. Kol Shekarav Lamilo. If the get is closer to her than to him, the Ilu Bak Kelev Unitalo. V'hu yachol l'shomro, v'hi eina yachol l'shomra. If when we say that it's closer to her, we mean proximity, and yet when if a dog were to come and try to take it, the husband would be able to guard it, and the wife would not be able to guard it. Eina megoreshes. She's not divorced. Meaning that according to this brisa, as we've interpreted, what Rabbi Eliezer is saying is that proximity doesn't matter. What matters is the ability to guard. And that's why he's raising the concept of a dog coming and taking it away. And that's exactly what Rabbi Yochanan was saying. And so as a result, this brisa is consistent with Rabbi Yochanan. So that was answer number 3. Answer number 4, Amar le Shmuel Rav Yehuda. Shmuel says, what does it mean when I say close? Shinina Kadesha Tashuach Visitlena. Listen, sharp one. What does it mean? It's that she can stoop and take it. Meaning it's got to be, when we say close to her, we mean it's grabbable. And yet, even though we have a Mishnah that says specifically that it's a valid get, don't rule like this in practice. It's got to get into her hand. And so Amarle Rab Mordechai the Rav Ashi, and indeed Rav Mordechai said to Rav Ashi, Hava Uvda Hachiva Atzrucha Batzruchuha Chalitza. Indeed, there was a situation where the wife could have just reached down and grabbed the get, but in the time before she did so, because she didn't really care, the husband dropped dead. And now, what did the rabbi say? Listen, yes, it was right there, and you could have gotten it. But we're going to say that because your husband didn't have any children and he has a brother, you're going to have to do chalitza with the brother. Okay. Now we said v'chein le'inyan kedushin, the same thing. Just all the rules that we just said also apply to marriage. Well, one second we have a statement that seems to contradict this because Amar Rabbi Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, legidin amru below double davar acher. This rule that all this proximity rulings, this all applies only to divorce and not to something else. Well, one second. Rabbi Abba, Rabbi Asi, Rabbi Abba challenge v'chein le'inyan kedushin. One second, our Mishnah itself says that it applies to kedushin. No, shiny hasam, diksiv v'yatsa v'haisa. No, we have this connection between divorce and marriage because in the pasuk, this is a pasuk in Dvarim Parakaf Daled. Pasuk bet v'yatsa min beito v'halcha v'haisa le'ish acher, that she leaves his house and she goes and she's married to somebody else. So the v'yatsa and v'haisa being in such close proximity tells us that many of the rules associated with divorce also apply to marriage. So too here. So now a second challenge of Rav Asi's statement that it's only with respect to Gittin. But Esvei, v'chein le'inyan achov, we say in our Mishnah that it also applies to a debt, the payment of a debt. Zrok lichovi v'zrakolo, because if somebody says, throw me my debt, throw me the money you owe me, and he throws it. So karav lamalva zakal alova, karav alova alova chayev. If it's closer to the lender, the borrower is going to win. If it's closer to the borrower, the borrower is going to still be owing the money. And if it's 50-50, well, then they divide it. So I don't understand. You said that it doesn't apply to any case other than Gittin and now also marriage. Well, why does it apply? Our Mishnah says it specifically applies to a Baal Chov, to a debt. So here's what we're talking about. The Amar Le Zrok Lichovi V'Sipater. I'm specifically as the creditor, I'm telling the debtor to throw it to me and you will be exempt. And so as a result, that's what we're talking about. And so in that situation, well, in that case, that's pretty obvious. Meaning if I tell you anything to do, if I tell you to throw it into the river and you'll be exempt, you'll be exempt. So who cares about it? Meaning I told you what to do. You should be exempt. So lo tzricha de amar le zrok lichova b'toras Gittin. No, he said, throw it to me, and we're going to follow the laws of Gittin. Because after all, if I just say throw it to me and you'll be exempt, well, then even if you throw it to me and it doesn't, and it stays very close to you, I told you to throw it to me. I didn't tell you anything about proximity. So maybe it would even be a valid return in that situation. But I went beyond that and I said, throw it to me and we're going to treat it just like a get. Well, one second, again, isn't it obvious that we should follow these rules? So no, I would have thought Matzi Amar La Le Mishate Ani B'cha. I was just joking with you. How can you possibly think that I was saying that you should treat an obligation, a monetary obligation, like a divorce document? Of course, those are totally different. So Kamash Malan, no, we can apply this, and we won't say that the person is just joking. All right, so Amarachista get biyada umashicha biyado. So if now we've got the string attached where the husband gives a get, but there's a string attached to it and it's still in his hand. Im yachol anatko lahavio etzlo. If the string is such that he could pull it and bring the get back to him, ain't a megareshes. She's not divorced. The imlav megareshes. But if the string's not that, doesn't have that ability, meaning if it will rip very easily. So then she's considered divorced. My timer. Why is this the case? Bein increases Valeka. We need a separation. They need to be separated. And if we don't have that separation, then the string is strong enough to pull it back. Then they are not divorced. Next and final case for today, Amar of Yehuda, Haisa Yada Asuya Kikatafras. So let's say she doesn't accept the get like this, but rather she leaves her hands pointing down, as Rashi explains, Kikatafras Miduron Roshe Etzboseha Matin Lakarka. She has her fingers pointing down towards the ground. Shalo Pashta Yada Zakufa. She didn't put out her hands flat. Kedera Koshta Yad, as one would ordinarily put out their hand. And so as a result, it's going to fall onto the ground. Now, Uzrakalo, and now the guy again throws her the get. It touches her hands, but it now falls off onto the floor. Afal Pisha Higia get liyada, even though the get hit her hand. Aina Migoreshes, she is not divorced because it did not have the possibility of staying in her hand. Amai Haki Nafa Ba'arba Amos Didaka Nafa. Well, 1 second. What about the whole concept of Arba Amos, that it fell within her Arba Amos? Shouldn't that be sufficient for her to be divorced? Bidelo nach. We're talking about a situation where it never came to rest.
Wow.
And why did it never come to rest? Because, as Rashi puts it, take a look at the Rashi 3, 6, 8 lines up. Bidelo nach la'aretz. It never landed on the ground. Elikishin nafal metoch yada. When it fell out of her hand, nisra. It got burned by a fire. The Kabbalah Shibali Yada, and the acceptance that it came to her hand, Lav Kabbalahi, is not considered an acceptance. All right, well, move in second. What about the airspace? Let the airspace that which is within her 4 amos may be sufficient to acquire. So Tivsha Debai Rabbi Elazar, Arba Amos, Sha'amru, Yesh Lan Avir, O Ein Lahan Avir. Let's allow this to answer the question of whether or not Arba Amos can, the airspace of Arba Amos has the ability to perform an acquisition. And Tivsho to Ein Lahan Avir. And let's answer the question and say that based on the fact that if in fact she has her hands like this and the get falls off and it's hanging in the air, and just before it gets burned by the magical flame of fire that shoots out and burns it, but before it's in the air and it's in her airspace, and we say it doesn't cause her to be divorced, so doesn't that show that airspace does not cause an acquisition? And why don't we use this as a proof of that fact? Because we can't use it as a proof of that fact because Baumedes Agav HaNahar, we're dealing where she's standing over a stream. And as a result, because she's standing over a stream, it isn't her property. It will never land in a spot that will be considered her property. It will always be moving. It's as if it's not there. And so as a result, so as a result, even once it leaves her hand, it's ready to be destroyed. As Rashi says, last Rashi on the Ayin Chet Amabet, the Avir, last line, the Avir she'ena roi lenuach lo kani. Airspace, even whatever we were going to answer with respect to the question of Rabbi Lazar, of whether airspace causes an acquisition or not, we will all agree, the Avir she'ena roi lenuach lo kani. Airspace that never has the ability to result in it landing in a safe place will never cause the acquisition. It will never come to rest. And so as a result, we don't know the answer to Rebbe Lazar's case in a case where it would have come to rest. And so as a result, we are stuck. All right. We are now still dealing with these tossed get cases. We've mentioned now at this last moment, we've mentioned this concept of airspace. And so that's going to lead to our next Mishnah, which will deal with the wife's airspace acquiring the get for her. But as I like to say, for that, stay tuned to tomorrow's daf. And again, tomorrow's daf will be Zoom only. And I will look forward to seeing you at bright and early 5:45 Denver time, 7:45 New York time, as we continue our path through Maseches Gittin. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Not going to